All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 30 of the Blob Watch. And I'm joined with two co-founders of the Wellington Project. Welcome. So we've got John. How are you doing, John?
I am fantastic. It's already
Great.
Tuesday, so the week's nearly half over.
Oh, that's good. And we're also joined straight from the pub. Joz, how are you doing?
I've just had a rather large meal, so I'm falling asleep slowly.
Okay.
I'll keep awake just for you guys.
Oh, that's good. And of course, we've got our resident mature member.
Mature.
Resident boomer.
we can't be saying boomer now because we have to be professional, Jobs. We can't be using those.
Professional.
Resident,
that is incel language. That is incel language.
Yeah.
Forgive me.
Yeah. The term is just let's just go with the mature.
Yes. Yes. The mature. What among us?
The
Robert,
veteran.
how are you doing, sir?
The veteran. I like veteran.
The veteran Tory.
How are you doing, Robert, this evening?
I'm fine. It's kind of in that hectic back to school mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are your shoes? Do you have your shoes?
I've been on the receiving end of that.
I've avoided that one now.
And we got people in chat, so the usual troublemakers here. And
like that one.
Yes, and yes. Thank you, AJR. Thank you for warning. The volume. If you go to watch this, because I put a link in the description for this, the current conservative climate
it's
event.
Very quiet.
It is very quiet. I recommend if you got like earpods or some form of headphones, listen with that and turn the volume up max because you'll need it because the volume is not the greatest. But
They need to get a new mic, don't they, chat?
I will point fingers. Apparently, it was run by Blue Beyond the stream. It was on their channel. Also, if you're looking for it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not going to chuck any shade at them. Not going to do that. But yeah. So that's the warning. So we three of us here watched it. I've watched it twice. John, you've watched it twice. Josh, I think have you watched it?
Well, I was there live and I haven't seen anything of it since.
Josh was chief commenter.
I asked about half of the questions they took from the audience. Yeah, I just got a scattergun in case just so that they actually found one of mine.
Okay, and Rubber, you've not watched it, but you've communicated with a few of the people on screen here, so you know.
Yes, I have. I kind of know where they stand on a lot of issues. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's good. So yeah, let's talk about the panel. So John, you've got what was the lineup? Because I'm just trying to find the.
Sure. So the lineup, and I apologise if I butcher anyone's names. You had Emily Hewitson and Lacey Butcher who were presenting or hosting. Rather.
Do you want to go from left to right on the screen, just so we?
Sure. Bear with me. So you've got from left to right, you've got Jake Scott, who is a political theorist. You've then got this name I'm going to butcher, so I apologise. Ciorci Duffy, who's a public relationship manager. You've then got Casey Byrne, who is a graphics analyst for Blue Beyond, and then Chloe Grant, who's Northeast Chairman of the Conservative Women's Association. You've then got the two presenters, Emily Hewitson and Lacey Butcher, or hosts rather. And then we've got Luke Doherty, Chairman of the Orthodox Conservatives, Maya Tusi, who is a political broadcaster and host of the Maya Tusi Show. Then you've got Alice Grant, Education and Institutions Lead for the Orthodox Conservatives, and Samuel Martin, who is Editor-in-Chief of the Mallard.
Very good. So effectively what we've got here, and I think it's safe to say, is you've got the progressive wing, the I guess you could say sort of conservative wing, and then more like right of centre wing of the party, that you got like all three groups represented on this panel.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable deduction. Yeah.
This whole thing was kind of billed as a bit of a debate. There wasn't that much disagreement, I felt, between the panelists. Obviously, we know that they disagree, but they didn't argue with each other very much.
But that's because that's how things are done in the Conservative Party. As long as, when I was back in the Young Conservatives and ever since then, it doesn't get it never gets hysterical. It's just
but what I'm saying is this whole event was billed as a debate, which is what I thought it was initially.
I think they were very clear that there wasn't going to be any sort of like arguing. It was just a kind of exposing of positions, so that you could begin to kind of, I guess, understand the kind of the undercurrents within the, I guess in this case, the sort of young conservative movement, and put everything on the table so that you can begin to kind of understand a direction, which I think is quite difficult. And I think it was highlighted in the meeting that basically there is no unifying undercurrent. There's quite a broad range of what people want or are willing to accept, or what they perceive to be the ideal direction for the Conservative Party. I don't think they I think they just surfaced what we already know.
William Yarwood saying it wasn't very long.
I mean, I've taken part in like these I guess like a debate format where it's timed, there's limited time and individual you have to get your point across, maybe counter your point, especially if you're debating with a large group. And this is the thing. I mean, you've got
there's eight panelists.
I mean, if it was like one person representing like three factions from like the progressive wing, conservative, and then centre right, then maybe you could have had quite an interesting debate. I think when we go to the second half, it's when you have the Q&A. I think that's actually the sort of the best part of the event, because this is where you had I guess more interaction between the panelists, especially on points of disagreement.
I tell you what's quite interesting. I don't want to be too negative from the outset, but when they got to the Q&A, it was interesting to see the interactions and how shallow some of the depth of understanding of the other positions there were across the panelists. I think I don't know if we'll get to it. I think it was Maya Tusi made what I thought was quite a reasonable point, and then and I'm not picking on people in particular. I really don't want to do that. Casey really didn't get where he was coming from. Oh, it's in relation to the NHS and institutions and why people have gone along with the kind of COVID line from the government. And Casey really didn't get it. And there was more than one example of that, I thought, where they were talking across each other. They weren't really there was no depth of understanding of the alternative positions.
I mean, I guess we can say that. Is it safe to say that broadly this was a good event? I personally enjoyed it a lot, way more than I thought I would.
I think for what it was. I don't think it wasn't enjoyable. The audio quality could have been better, but apart from that,
I also think it was
interesting.
I think it was something that we've had. Kind of like the Blue Beyond, we've had the progressive wing and the drier wing kind of operating almost independently and oblivious to one another. And I think it's very good that they can come together and have a discussion like this. I think for Casey, probably, I haven't seen Casey's position on this, but he would have most likely been in a kind of confirmation bias bubble for quite some time. And there he is with Maya Tusi, who we got to acknowledge also this is a very young panel. and Maya Tusi represents he's probably the oldest one there.
I think everyone was under 35. I saw.
Yeah, well, I would say most of them are under 27.
Yeah,
I think from the panelists they were all under 30.
Yeah.
I think they made a point of that very early on.
Yeah.
So there's not much, from what I know of, like the Blue Beyond crowd, and one or two of them, the one person who's not there, who's a leading figure, Luke Roberts, said there's no point in us just being some new version of the Young Conservatives who just exist in an isolation bubble. We have to then now link with the older members of the party, the drier members of the party. And I think this is a good format to do that. And I think if Casey didn't understand Maya Tusi's position, it's because he's not been exposed to it. And an event like this would go a long way in solving that.
It's possible, but I think maybe I've not explained myself well. It wasn't. Maya Tusi's position was very clearly explained, and if you were in any way erudite, you'd be able to understand what he's trying to put across. But there just wasn't that kind of ability to unpack and process that information on the fly. And I found that interesting, because if these are the kind of thought leaders, I would have expected a bit more in that regard, a bit more ability in that regard to kind of process and unpack ideas and opinions.
So, I see. Do you want us to play like a bit of the opening, just so we get like their positions?
The first section of it was all about the individual panelists, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the first bit we got here is about each individual panelist's position, and then we maybe after that we'll pause it, because we don't want to go through like all the discussion, and then we'll sort of talk about the Q&A bit and how and the interaction, because me and Joz we actually submitted questions via the stream, and
Are you sure? I heard them say Joz, and I heard them say a guy called Al Shear Tory, but
yeah. Well, apparently, the UK's education standard for basic English is lacking. So,
or you could just choose a name that's easy to say, like 3 letters and one's a little.
Shire. I refuse to believe that anybody on this planet, or anybody in this country, who
doesn't know what Shire is. Yeah.
Well, can't even pronounce what Shire is. It is. I mean, it's in some of the freaking county names, for God's sake.
Especially when this person literally lives in a shire.
Tory, Warwickshire, Birmingham.
Okay. Well, that was amazing.
To be fair, this person probably does pronounce it Northamptonshire as well.
Actually, yeah, you're right there.
There you go. Education system needs improvement. Then, so anyway, let's
always speak with West Country accents, right?
If only. Who's opening crisps?
Actually,
you can't have any noise while this lot's speaking.
Yeah,
he's having some biscuits.
He's
having his 3 biscuits.
I can barely hear this at the moment.
Please do that before the break. Anyone here?
Do you want to put the captions on? Can't hear anything.
No, I think the problem is because we're streaming a stream which had poor audio. Okay, so
are there any auto-generated captions, or are they going to be crap if the audio is rubbish?
Oh,
we'll see. It might be quite funny.
Let's see.
That'd be terrible.
Okay, let's see if it works.
We want to be civilized and tame, but we do want a lively and healthy debate. So.
Civilized and tame, but also lively and healthy.
First up, we have Jake Scott. Jake Scott is a directoral researcher of political theory at the University of Birmingham, specialising in phenomenological study of populism.
Yeah, I was quite impressed by this guy, Jake Scott. I'd never really come across him before.
No, I've seen him about on Twitter, but
I think him and Sam Martin were the new ones that I was the most impressed by.
specialization on the emergence of populism is available in the PSA Politics Journal.
And next up, we have JohnEP. He is a PR associate from London, heading up work around employment, diversity, and inclusion. Formerly, he worked.
Oh God, he's a diversity officer. I missed that bit.
Examining the provision of services.
Good
and then
grief.
later on the service.
We've got diversity officers.
Mr. Scott's in the chat as well.
Ben, he is a politicus.
I'm of the opinion that diversity officers will become the camp commandant.
He's a member of the Conservatives for 4 years.
You just choked on my drink, you prick. Because they're
Your name will go on the list.
in the party second. Yeah, that's not going to happen.
No.
So this girl, if I'm right in saying she worked with what's she called, Priti Patel, or something.
Yes.
There
Or
was
yeah.
about that later
in
on.
an office working for. Yeah, I think so.
Is it actually a paid position or is it just a unpaid? I don't know. We need to look into that.
Good
Yeah.
lad.
Rod, yes.
Yeah, that's why I was asking them to define social conservatism, because I think they need to put that a little bit, the scrutiny stuff.
You could have put cultural conservatism and sort of like just directed them directly to the sort of scrutiny position.
Well, that's what he did. As soon as I asked him, he
Well, yes, yeah.
launched into a talk about scrutiny, because
Yeah.
I mean that's what I was saying to them on Twitter beforehand. Is they need to kind of define what they're talking about to start with.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Alice Grant, who is the Education and Institutes Lead for the Orthodox Conservative. She became heavily involved in the Vote Leader campaign, making regular media appearances and gaining considerable traction online. She's considered
Filthy Catholic.
She's extremely Catholic, isn't she?
So that's a -1% on the.
I think AI. You'll find that most of this lot are Catholic.
Oh dear.
Well,
Oh.
obviously, being Wellington stands, we're fine with them having their emancipation, right? Or
I
You
mean,
can vote, but
we,
so long
we
as
do
they vote.
rely on a lot of Northern Irish support, so we have to, level it out a bit. We can't be too papist, John.
Oh, Jake's Anglican.
All right, good lad.
Good boy.
Yeah.
So the key to this debate, each panelist will have 3 minutes to discuss the main borders of their arguments, discussing the Conservative Party, where it is, and where.
Oh,
I think yeah, Sam Martin was quite funny. His probably his speaking was probably the most eloquent. I don't think the volume issues were a problem with him.
Especially towards the end.
Yeah, yeah. Are we gonna watch all of this? Because I guess having the captions on is a bit awkward.
Yeah. So this is the first panel.
Yeah, so I guess Jake's main. I mean, Jake is in the chat right now, but he can correct us if we're wrong. His main point was about not playing to win. It seems, which I'd say is somewhat true. The sort of conserving 10 years ago as opposed to anything.
Yeah. And yeah, I'll play the rest of it just so we get to sort of people can see,
Sure.
I guess, through the chat as well what the point being made.
Yeah, the auto-generated subtitles are pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This was the point that I was quite intrigued about, because this is something that I don't think is really talked that often.
Yes, no, I like this a lot. The wanting to undo rather than do.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, because this is the criticism. I'll just pause it here. I don't not being rude, Jake. Just so we understand that. Because if you, as I say, if you want to go and watch the full thing without our commentary, so you can see the whole thing, because it's probably a lot better than just us talking about it and you reading sort of text that's probably not accurate in translation anyway. But the point is here. This is the main criticism that is leveled against the Conservative Party by people on the right in general, that no matter what you do, you end up just pushing Labour policies from 5 years ago, or pushing policies, or will be inevitable in 5 years' time. And this is the problem, because how many laws a day was Tony Blair signing when he first was elected? What was it like? It was
far too many.
There was something like a law a day, I think, over the course of his.
I think it was more. I think it was like 3 a day, because this is unprecedented. Like in the time of, I mean, there was an interesting chart that actually went back to the Norman, the Norman Conquest.
In his tenure as Prime Minister than the entirety of English history up to that point.
Yeah, it was a real cultural revolution.
There's a BB. If you type how many laws passed in Tony Blair government into Google, you get a BBC News article, and you can see by year every single act he passed. It's phenomenal.
It even made I remember in the 2005 general election, even the Liberal Democrats did a party political broadcast complaining about the amount of legislation that was being passed. This was Charles Kennedy's
Lib Dem bill, for sort of super repealing bill that they tried to put through, wasn't there?
So in 2005 there were 19 acts passed. I don't think, I mean, and that was a light year. In 2006 there must have been double that. I don't know.
So if you make the Liberal Democrats balk at the amount of legislation, you know you're in excessive territory.
Yeah. It's maddening.
So it was a 22% increase over the average 2,196 laws made annually over the previous 10 years. That's from 1987 to 96. So that's like from the latter end of the Thatcher administration into the John Major administration. So 22% increase. There are actually a fair few people who did cover this sort of. Well, I guess I think it was just after Blair left office, so the Guardian and what have you. So there was quite a few look about this. So the 5 acts passed 2006, totaling more than 100 pages, 3 more than 200, and more than 300, 500. So yeah, a lot of the acts that were passed in a day on average was about like 1, 2, or 3. I think the largest quantity was from 97 to 2001. There was a huge unprecedented increase, and this is the problem that
well, the problem you've got with that is that you're making laws and acts record breaking, breakneck speed that you can't possibly vet in full, understand against the complexity of all the other acts.
John, it didn't matter, because Tony Blair, he had, 415 seats? I mean, he had an overwhelming supermajority in our parliament that you could have like 50 Labour MPs and he would still probably win. 50 Labour MPs vote against him and he would still win.
Oh, I'm not disputing that. I'm just, I'm highlighting how ridiculous
that's why.
It is. Like, it's not reasonable to have that. I mean, even if there was the need for new laws at that speed, it's just not reasonable given the apparatus to kind of have all that going on.
Well, the thing is that it was also that they, on the one hand, we're talking about this years later as this kind of shocking, unprecedented amount of legislation, and we all agree that it's too much. But back in those days, in the early 2000s, if you were to suggest this is too much, the Blair government with Campbell spun it in such a way as saying, but we're doing something. And it was all important for the Blair government throughout its time was to be seen to be doing something. And it was spun in a way that doing all this stuff was actually a positive, a good thing. And you just weren't allowed to criticize it. And if you did criticize it, you were considered a crank.
Sounds familiar.
Yes. I mean, so like, I think one of the biggest ones that, I mean, as a conservative, you could ask, you could say that this would have been like the biggest point of contention for any conservative would be devolution, the creation of a Scottish Parliament, a Welsh Assembly. I mean, Northern Irish Assembly is a bit different because there was precedent for a Northern Irish separate assembly because of the political differences in Northern Ireland. So one could argue that such assembly could exist because there was a previous variation of it. But
yeah, I guess the problem with that is the precedent there kind of allows for the precedent to be implemented elsewhere, right? That's the as soon as you
Well,
have
it start getting a bit terroristy.
yeah, I think I mean, Northern Ireland, I believe they actually had, like, Northern Ireland actually had like a prime minister of Northern Ireland before the Troubles. Correct me if anyone chat if I'm wrong, but I believe it was treated, even though part of the UK, as like its own thing, because you had you didn't have like the Labour, the mainstream party standing. I mean, I know the Ulster Unionist Party was in effect one with the Conservative Party, but there was slight difference, especially with because you had sort of the rise of various Republican parties, whether they were Sinn Féin or an independent Republican or what have you, standing in certain seats. But yeah, But I mean, that would be legislation you would be looking to maybe not overturn, but you look at Cameron. What did he do? He further carried on the devolution mania, giving more powers to Wales and especially to Scotland.
Well, ultimately, the problem with this, and this isn't strictly what Jake was talking about. He was talking about the Equalities Act, which I think we should get to in a second.
Yes, we'll get to.
The problem with this is that, and it was amply and adequately highlighted by Enoch Powell in the 70s, and 70s in relation to Ireland, is that all it did was encourage and make terrorists feel like they were gaining ground, that through acts of terrorism they could gain the things that they wanted. And Enoch Powell worked very hard with the official Ulster Unionist Party to bring a more unionist approach to Irish politics. And obviously, once he lost and we move forward in time, that's all gone by the wayside since. But the point still stands, is that by suggesting to terrorists or to dissidents that they can get their way through apolitical means, you encourage and embolden their actions.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, obviously that could, that was that's something that one could argue
and the Conservative Party are doing this today with people like Extinction Rebellion, who I genuinely believe are domestic terrorists.
Yeah, and I mean, you can also see it somewhat with like the recent. I mean, I was watching Farage earlier talking about the UK government's position towards Taliban, where there's this belief that there might actually be like an informal alliance or alliance to combat this ISIS-K that's supposedly operating in
Special K.
Yeah, Special K. But you see that with there. I mean, the sort of legitimacy within Afghanistan. Now, I mean, there is a practical thing. One, you have to say, well, technically the Taliban are now the government, but should we treat them as an ally Probably not. Probably the more prudent thing would be to leave the region. Just take a break from it, because it seems.
Do you not think the dissidents that you're talking about, there's the Northern Ireland IRA, I suppose, Extinction Rebellion, are they not ones that the people making the laws, making the rules, sort of maybe not exactly agree with, but are at least somewhat aligned with? You've got the green politics, the evolution side.
No, what I think it is that, and I've said this before on previous streams we've done, is that a lot of the higher up parts of the party are still in fear of the media, and they're in thrall of optics. So it's not that if you spoke to Conservative MPs, I don't think they approve of Extinction Rebellion, but to clamp down on
do
the
they agree with the green politics?
They can't be that concerned.
I'm not sure.
I saw Michael Gove at the weekend doing his dancing.
Yeah, but if you've met the guy, you just know that's you. I mean, we in the local constituency, we were joking about this the other day at a constituency meeting, and go, yeah, well, Govey's going to go. It's just what he did. There is this media side, but those who know him a little bit just know it's not out of character for him to do dad dancing in an Aberdeen nightclub just randomly. It's just, yeah. But that's a distraction. And what I think is going on is that, on the one hand, a lot of Conservative MPs' instincts would be, well, you send the police in, but the police are dominated by the College of Policing and beyond the government's touch, it seems. And the party is scared of the optics of going in hard against bunch of middle class whiny hippies or wannabe hippies, and how the press is going to write that up and how it's going to get spun. They live in fear of this stuff. I said that the current leadership cadre in the middle is isolated from the voters.
So, I mean, this is the thing. It's quite clear that the pigs are in control of the farm at this point.
Yes.
Yeah, and what I think the Extinction Rebellion is, I mean, it's quite an interesting one, because, I mean, obviously I described it as, I mean, I think it's a pure AstroTurf movement that's been formulated within corporate boardrooms. I don't think I mean, number one, it came out of nowhere, and number two, nobody that, and I like to think that I don't exist in the echo chamber, but I saw no evidence of such a movement rising up in any way, because I am like, I was active on, I used to go on at this point in time, which was a couple of years ago now, Reddit and sort of lefty forums on there and what have you. So yeah, I didn't see this thing coming at all, but it does seem to be a way to signal boost to the Conservatives, because that's the thing, and this is where I think it's something. I going back to this panel that maybe wasn't said, but I think many were on this sort of page where it doesn't really matter if the Conservatives do get elected, and I think Luke. I think it was it Luke? Was it Doherty?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who sort of came to the conclusion that it would be better the Conservatives next election lose, and I can sympathise with that point.
That was quite brave of him, I think.
I can sympathise.
I know Rubber's going to disagree.
Yeah, I know. Rubber, you come back, but the reason why I sympathise with that point is there is a deep philosophical problem here, because if the Conservatives continue on this path where they can win elections, Labour are not electable at this moment in time. That's something we know. We just fact of life at this moment in time. But the point is, Labour doesn't have to, or the powers behind Labour don't have to win, because they can use their influence in institutions, in policing, in all aspects of society, and their activist base, which is pretty much what Labour Party is at this point now. And active, and these groups like Extinction Rebellion to push the agenda, which the Conservatives will just adopt and continue. And so you have this very sort of ruthless circle of lefty group forms, does something, and then Conservatives enact that policy, and it's that sort of circle. And
The thing
what it's
is-
doing is any sort of remaining soul of conservatism which is left in the party is just been extrapolated, and the party is becoming an empty shell. I mean, if it's not an empty shell at the moment, I don't know what it is. But and that's what I sort of get from elements of this panel. That, and I think this is why Luke came to that conclusion, because they need to. The party does desperately need to regain some aspect of conservatism at this point, because or any right wing thought. And
well, the party
go
is
on.
doing the party is doing what the mechanics of the party does, which is that it reflects back to the people what the will of the people is. Unfortunately, it's not the broader will of the people. It's the will of these pressure groups that they're reflecting back. And of course, this is deeply unpopular with
the biggest lie, chat and viewers watching, is there's no such thing as I guess what's described as emergent behavior, popular consent. That is usually formed by groups, and one could argue that Brexit was very popular, but 52% obviously supported it. I mean, you could say the die-hard supporters is even a lower percentage than that. But the point is, in all this, is that you can formulate popular belief within your own group. And I think this is where the Conservatives fail, because they mistake. They fall into the trap of left-wing propaganda, telling them what's popular, and then enacting that.
Well, here's the thing. So take something like the environment. It is a conservative position to believe in ecological management for the benefit of the broader population, say. So it is a conservative view that you would have areas designated for recreational enjoyment of the countryside, green spaces. You might factor in more green spaces into planning, for example, so that you've got tree-lined roads, or all this kind of stuff that just makes living more pleasant and is beneficial in general for the environment around us. It is not the Conservative position to ram through policies that result in the opening of open-cast lithium mines in Africa, mined by children, to provide electric cars for everyone, because we've decided that a handful of campaigners want electric cars by 2030 or whatever it is.
Yeah,
that's not the broader popular position.
No, and
Right Honourable Fez is correct to say that the panel's understanding of that was lacking.
Well, I mean, to their credit, none of them said that they thought it was achievable to do that. The net zero.
Yeah, but they seem,
one
they seem to be in.
I think
not be opposed to this idea of net zero. They just think the timeline might be wrong.
That was only one person, though.
But the point is that the one person was, what was it? If you disagree with the agenda, that means you're not listening to scientists, and that means you're a climate denier, and so. But that's the thing.
There was that, wasn't there? There was, all right, put your hand up if you're a climate denier or something.
Yes.
Yeah, I know, but that is straw man arguments, which again
is nonsense, because very few. They're a bit like flat earthers in the sense that very few people believe that there is no climate change. But what we disagree on is the impact, the ability, and extent of human involvement in that. Or whether for the better or for the worse.
The disagreement I have profoundly is the fact that this country that I live in is somehow a major contributor. I mean, let's be honest. India, China, there you go.
Well, it's
How
nonsensical.
does
It's nonsensical for England, a population of 70 million people, to talk about net zero when China, a population of over 1 billion, are building a coal-fired power plant every day.
Yeah.
It's
and
just
the idea that
meaningless.
we have to economically castrate ourselves for some mythical belief that we're somehow a major contributor is just, I mean, to sort of turn around and use the science argument is just a weak cope, in my opinion. But going back to
all I'll say is that climate change is going to be great for wine growers in Britain. And if people really believed in climate change, you'd have a lot more people investing in wine growing at the minute.
I have heard the progressive argument as to why we have to take the hit and not China, which is that we started this with the Industrial Revolution and somehow we have to pay penance. And who are we? Well, now we've hauled ourselves to the top of the technological tree, as it were. Why are we denying the opportunity of China and India and the developing nations
That's
the
not a very
opportunity to
scientific
get
argument.
what we have achieved?
That sounds like a moral argument to me, not a scientific one.
No, it is a completely immoral argument,
Yeah.
but that is the one. That's
Science has become about morality.
Yeah, but I mean, that's that argument you reject out of hand, because it's quite clear that they dislike this country and want to, China to succeed and us not to. I mean, quite frankly, because if you cared about the environment, you would care about it whether it was in England or in China. You would care about it in both countries. But going back to the sort of Jake's point, so the Equalities Act. So this, presumably this is the Equalities Act of 2006 we're talking about here.
2010, I think he said.
Or was it 2010 one? Yeah, so because you had the Equalities Act of 2006, which was what this covered, and so this was under just before Blair left office, and the act was to make provision for the establishment of the Commission for Equality and Human Rights, to dissolve the Equal Opportunities Commission, the Commission for Racial Equality, and the Disabled Rights Commission, to make provision and discrimination on grounds of religion or belief, to enable provision to be made about discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation, to impose duties relating to sex discrimination on persons performing public functions, to amend the Disability Discrimination Act 95, and for the connected purpose.
In short, it's a continuation of a group of laws that prevents a person from engaging freely with who they choose to engage with in any circumstance.
Yeah, and what you have
it is a case of the government assuming ownership over my body, which I reject entirely.
Yeah,
because it undermines the principle of freeborn rights. My property is my own, and my body is my property to do with as I see fit.
Yeah, and because I always think back to that case in Northern Ireland quite some time ago, which was the I think it was Northern Ireland. I'm pretty sure it was the baker who refused
Ash's
to
bakery.
Yeah, bakery who refused to serve a gay couple, and
it goes further than that. They did not refuse to serve a gay couple. They refused to bake a cake.
That was
they promoted.
Yeah, it was a special cake to be made for the wedding. He would serve them, but not serve in the aspect of making a sort of like a special wedding cake.
Promoted homosexuality.
Yeah. Because what the message they want, the customer wanted, it wasn't that I refuse to serve you because you're gay. It wasn't even please put on the cake happy wedding to Steve and Jeff. It wasn't that. It was that it had the rainbow flag, and the message was to be support gay marriage.
Yeah.
And Ashers considered that to be a political statement, and they refused to do it.
Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, quite frankly, marriage shouldn't be in the realms of the state anyway.
So the 2010 Equalities Act, I've just actually been looking for it because I reminded myself, and in many ways, because this was, of course, under the coalition government. Was it? Hang on a second. Let me have a look at the Actually, this is 20. So this could.
Brown.
Oh no, sorry, no. This was. This was at the tail end of the Brown administration. Okay, right before the general election. So, and this one was a complete. I guess like an even sort of worse infringement. So what you have here is you had the creation of an all-women shortlist allowed in political parties.
The irony is it introduced more inequality, but never mind.
Yes, and it was exempted under or permitted or given some sort of loophole because you had the Sex Discrimination Election Candidates Act of 2002. So this is the really funny thing. You actually had many Blair's laws that he passed ended up contradicting each other and then sort of technically undoing each other.
Yes, helped by the fact that there could never possibly be enough time for MPs to read them all properly and understand the implications, and additionally helped by the fact that he didn't need to count on, he could count on getting them through anyway.
Yes.
But the other thing is that even though they contradicted each other, if anybody in the press or anybody in the opposition would say, but this, this policy, this legislation is a mess, Blair could always point to, but we did this, we introduced this law, we did this, it was all done to make his Labour government look proactive in all areas of life.
Well, this is what they believe the government should do, though, isn't it? Be involved in all areas of life.
No. Well, do you remember the quote by Andrew Marr? And this was in about the mid 2000s. So this would have been in the Blair years. But he said, it's the job of government to drag the population kicking and screaming against its will to where it wants to be. That's Andrew Marr said that.
Yeah. Okay, Stalinist.
Robert, you just made an argument for anarchism there. I hope you realise that.
No, I believe no, not anarchism, because anarchists would want people dragged kicking and screaming for their stuff. So,
I mean, there was also
Mad Max World. No.
At the time of this bill, there's also a debate, and I don't know if this was passed with the bill or with a later bill. I think it was a later bill, but it was reform of the monarchy, which I think there was an amendment that was going to be attached to this. So this would be the repealing the Act of 1701. So that
brilliant.
Preventing Roman Catholics from marrying into the monarchy, and also changing the laws of succession. So it firstborns would inherit the thrones regarding of the gender. So it wouldn't naturally go to the son if he has like older sisters. Then the older sister would be queen, which is, I mean, for the reason why I would say that monarchy one, and I think it was passed, wasn't it?
I think it's from Charles's children. Well, no. Charles has only got sons, and William has an elder son, so it doesn't.
Yeah, but the point is with the Roman Catholic stuff, and this is something that is quite important, because the sort of premise of our nation effectively is that the monarch is the defender of the faith, and whether you like it or not, the Church of England is that entity that the crown possesses and in charge of and is instructed of defending.
Everyone at the end of this conference who said they wanted a Catholic absolute monarchy needs to understand that.
Well, I mean, they do have to understand, because the problem is then you end up you could risk recreating Blairite policy, but from like the other end of a poorly written bit. I mean,
not to mention a Jacobite rebellion, but
I mean, maybe it's just my inner sort of my inner Orange Order stripes coming out here, but no Catholics allowed to marry into the royal family. But do you want to know who the people were exempt from all these equality acts were? Do you want to know who were exempt from this?
Go on.
Priests, monks, nuns, rabbis, and ministers of religion.
Right. Apart from
So-
the Church of England, or
Sorry?
is that including the Church of England?
Presumably, it says priests, monks, nuns, rabbis, and ministers of religion.
So they're exempt as in they can be racist, or
I don't think that.
they're exempt as in we don't have to treat them equally.
Well, I don't think they're not. I mean, like, you can't have like an all-women shortlist in a nunnery. Probably wouldn't make much sense, would it?
Well, it makes complete sense in a nunnery.
An all
But then you
rabbi
have like 100% success rates, so it'd be yeah.
Well, it's always going to be an all-women shortlist.
Yeah, I know. So they succeed. They're the most diverse organisation in the history of the planet. So
I guess, is it to protect the kind of religious belief in terms of churches not wanting to necessarily perform gay
I
marriage
imagine so. Yeah,
and
yeah.
so that, yeah.
Obviously, didn't last long with Church of England when they allowed female vicars. The second group is actors and models in film, because it's see how dated this is, because all of this has been rolled back anyway at this point. Television and fashion industry, a British Chinese actress for a specific role, for instance. So, like, if you're making a film, I think this is still applicable today. Actually, you're making a film and you say, "Oh, I need a black person because this is set in West Africa at this particular time. Obviously, I need a black person to play this particular role," and you put like an advertisement out there for actors which says you must be black, because that won't be classed as I mean, presumably,
That's changed now.
that
It
has
has-
changed.
It hasn't changed legally, because that legal statute is still on the books, but the industry has self-policed itself. Whereas still, if you were setting something in Africa in the past, or from even contemporary stuff, yes, you could put an advert that's saying we need specifically black actors for this. You couldn't do it the other way around.
Oh no,
And the industry now will actively seek any other ethnicity other than white to fill historical roles, and that's not illegal. That's just something that has become industry standard and will be policed within the industry.
Yes.
I'm waiting for David Jason to play Kunta Kinte in the remake.
Yes, I
remember one time
Floyd movie played by Ryan Reynolds.
Right, so let's just get.
I was just going to add one thing. There was just I was a few years ago. I was in a debate on one of these film work websites that I used to be a member of, and the topic was should there be a black James Bond? And I said, well, no, because that's not how the character was conceived, and you have to work in this Etonian background and a Swiss mother and a British father, and he grew up in this very quaint village in Kent. You got to kind of figure, how does that fit in? Because that's not how Fleming conceived it. And they said,
fine nowadays, right?
That's fine now, though. This going back 5 years, and they said, well, that's a very racist position to take. And I said, all right, when are we going to get a white Shaft? The sort of the ultimate funky, cool New York cop. When is a white actor going to play Shaft? And the only response to that is, well, that's just being ridiculous. And I said, well, why?
Yes, you're the ridiculous one. Yeah.
If you want James Bond to be black, why can't a white actor play Shaft? And they couldn't answer me.
See, we're getting the crowd is getting rowdy because
I was about to say that. Yes, we spent an hour.
The crowd is not getting rowdy. Yes, I know. We're getting eggs. We got the eggs and such chucks. So, to summarise, that
Luke Doherty clearly doesn't know us very well if he thinks we're going to stay on topic for any longer than 5 minutes.
Sorry, Luke. If you come on this stream, you're in it for the long haul.
I'm not.
Too bad.
Some of us are past our bedtime.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
half an hour.
okay. So on the first point of Jay, yeah, 2000, and I think it's a very good point actually. He raised 2010 Equalities Act. That is something that the Conservatives should have repealed.
If you want to
well,
return to
yes.
tradition or whatever, then you need to
Well,
start
I mean,
repealing
that
stuff
is,
in order
that
to
is
return.
you would expect someone who is conservative and would look at that in all its aspects and say, no, this is beyond the pale. This is not how our country should be, the place the country should be going in. We're going to repeal this because it is, in essence, just make further dividing society. And we also talked about how it's created even more inequality, especially on like these all women listings and everything.
It's the action of an illegitimate government because it removes from the individual the freeborn rights that they have.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just go to the next panelist on here.
What is that? Carrot Head.
No.
I think this is the person between Carrot Head and Jake.
Right.
See or
Unpronounceable guy.
I'm
Mr.
sure
Duffy.
someone.
Have they mentioned that the Conservatives? What's the status? Like in the last 100 years, they've spent 70% of the time in power.
It's that's a figure I'm very fond of quoting.
Yeah, I mean that's something I was asked. It's one of the questions I did ask to them: is to what extent can they blame the quote unquote socialist left, if that's true? Because they were harping on that a bit.
Well, the problem is everyone was a socialist after World War II, so it's
every single person since 1930.
Yeah. The post-war consensus was a disaster for British politics.
Well, I think on the opportunities for young people now, I think
boomers. There's the mention of the B word.
Dissing the
But
giants whose shoulders you stand on.
This is a classic mistake as well because I wouldn't go that far over, but they're dissing the people that are making sure the Conservatives actually are electable, or get elected.
Yes, if we had this demographic that we're looking at here voting, then I don't think they would be the ones in power.
Well, you'd be looking at a role reversal when it comes to the parties, if not the ideology.
I think that's this guy's point, though, isn't it? That what about his generation? What's in it for me? Where are my opportunities?
But that's something that Steve Bannon pointed out. He said that the generation coming through now, it's sort of what was the economic like Klaus Schwab. You'll own nothing, you'll eat the bugs, and you'll be happy. And this is something that I think he was sort of touching on, is the fact that the generation coming through are going to be as economically viable as a 19th century Russian serf, as Bannon would refer it as. And there is something to that. There is a push to, I guess, for the generation to come through to have as little to no assets as possible.
Well, I mean, I would have thought Tusi would be the one to talk to about this with his stance on central banking and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we'll continue this.
Yeah, this is the guy that thinks we need to be more liberal.
Change to not being, you will conserve nothing and be happy.
Yeah. So,
I would say to him, how's that worked out for the Church of England? pivoting towards young people?
Yeah,
I mean,
design-
from my sort of, I mean, okay, so we have to be a bit more liberal to appeal to younger people. That, I mean,
well, I think it
the
might
result from
be.
that would be just UKIP 2.0, and Conservatives will hemorrhage
Well,
votes to
what-
another third party.
One of
That-
the group on the right points out that basically you get as people age, they become conservative, more conservative. Well, and yeah, I suppose a lot of that's to do with the fact that when you're young, you live in a socialist utopia in the form of the family, the family home, and then as you leave home and begin to have your own
You have to
responsibilities,
seek your fortune, right?
yeah, that's when you begin to become conservative because you understand the meaning of labor and the value of your labor and the fact that you don't want to surrender your labor for the benefit of someone else who you don't get a say in. Like, I don't want to support certain people. It's like-
I've always said you could abolish universities and solve this problem all in one go, to be honest.
well, there is an argument there that says that because children are children for longer, it has delayed the point at which they become conservative.
There is an element of that, and there's also the fact. I mean, I don't want to. Well, I don't want to call them too much, but it's like have you seen, wages and house prices, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that's a bad argument.
Yeah,
I understand why that argument's made because it's an easy one, and there are a lot of problems with the housing market.
what I will say is that most people, especially my age, are kind of retarded and don't save at all.
Yeah, that's
they haven't been taught to, and there's no reason in their life why they should have done.
The government has removed the incentive to save. Anyone that had any savings before the 2008 crash would have spent it all afterwards because there's no value to saving.
Hold on, because this goes into the sort of Klaus Schwab worldview here, as Ataman was saying, that they can't accumulate any capital, which means they can't become right wing, which means they can't go up, and then you have like the Peter Pan theory.
That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. But
I have a difficulty with that because if you look at all these people on this panel, if you look at a lot of their Twitter profiles, you'll see, for example, they regularly go out, expensive meals, expensive drinking, and it's like, yeah, you can't accumulate capital because you spend it all.
Well, is it their money? I don't want to be.
I get what you mean. I mean,
it's symptomatic of a broader problem. I grew up with people. I come from a poor area. I grew up with people that would get their paycheck, and it wouldn't be a massive paycheck, but they'd manage to spend £200 or £300 on it in terms of clubbing in a month, no problem. But then they'd be complaining that they can't make the rent, or they can't afford to save for a mortgage or whatever. And it's like, well, you don't help yourselves. You want it to be given to you on a plate. You're not willing to do anything for yourself.
But that is a deep-rooted cultural problem, which is what preventing a lot of them growing up.
British people were good savers.
Yeah, I know they were. But what happened in the last 20 years, John?
Well, I know what's happened in the last 20 years, but the Conservatives need to understand that it's not about giving people homes. It's about giving them the tools so that they can choose to buy them if they want them.
Not giving them the tools is repealing the barriers.
Well, that's what I mean by giving them the tools. I mean, for example, making sure that the interest rate isn't zero because you've screwed up the economy and are continuing.
Here's another Blair legacy, and the fact that when he put in the tuition fees and then there was the student loans, he kind of encouraged everybody going into university to say, don't worry, you can rack up a debt and it's fine, it's okay. The government gives you its blessing to rack up a debt because you'll pay it off down the line when you enter employment. Now, with this chap here, I think he's got a kind of convoluted argument. So he's outlining the problems, which is young people in their 20s, they haven't got the job opportunities, the wages are too low, and the opportunity to get on the housing ladder has been greatly diminished. And so he says the solution to that is to go along with the kind of liberal left agenda on certain things. That the two don't follow. The two, you cannot solve the problems of housing and wages by adopting woke ideology in the conservative movement.
You can if you're associated or you're
Well, he ends up. I mean, all you do is you just snooker yourself and create more work for yourself, more problems for yourself.
So he's looking at purely from the point of view as what, you know, we're not going to solve the underlying problem, but at the same time, why don't we just adopt these few things so it will give us votes?
Well, it's as I think I said the other day, the duct tape over this system must be feet thick at this point.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
Right.
the interesting thing is that later in the evening event, they are asked the question on what they think in terms of migration, and most of them clearly understand that immigration is probably at the deepest root of this problem.
A few of them say zero or negative would be the ideal number.
Well, that's what I mean. There's one or two of them that basically don't care, and then I think most of them are either like tens of thousands or, like you say, zero or negative, which is exactly what they need to be saying, because
Zero until we figure out what the fuck's going on.
the root of all this is that the population of this country has grown by like 20 million in sort of in a very short space of time, and
We're all going to be shocked when the census comes out.
Yeah, when is that?
Is it this year?
it's dribs and drabs. I think the full census will be out in 2023.
What?
Yeah, they're being very careful about what they publish early, by the looks of it.
Well, I bet they are.
Because it's catastrophic, presumably.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right.
But the problem is we have an underlying population that would be flat in terms of growth or a slight decline, and
And it has
because
been since the 50s.
yes, and because our successive governments, for whatever reason, are unwilling or unable to prevent immigration, the population has swollen, and it means we're faced with making a choice. Do we pave over the ecology that we've chosen to preserve for the benefit of people that, you know, I'm sorry, don't belong here? I don't care if that sounds racist. They don't belong here. Or do we say, actually, no, we care about the ecology of our country. We care about the living standards of the people already here, and we recognise that because of the population, the birth rates, we don't need to build any, you know, to concrete over this green and pleasant land, and we can lower the house price by lowering the demand.
Yeah, but then you have to go into. I mean, again, this will tie back into what we'll talk about of cultural conservatism, of the reason why, not just like the economic argument of why immigration is bad, but actually the sort of deep-rooted cultural reason of why immigration should be at its. I mean, yeah, zero effectively.
Well, it's interesting because in the days when Enoch Powell talked about it, they talked about gross migration. They talked about actual numbers in, and once those numbers became ridiculous, they began talking about net migration because it's more convenient.
Yeah. We'll continue the.
And even now, that's become inconvenient. It's why it's why it's back again as virtually the number one issue.
I mean,
of
Wolverhampton,
voters.
which was his constituency. I mean, it's given the demographics, it's not going to vote Conservative. I mean, is it Conservative? I don't think it's Conservative at the moment.
No, I don't think it has been since Enoch Powell left office. Maybe.
Yeah, and you see that with some areas.
Yeah.
You see that with some areas around the country, in places like London and such. Places that used to be quite staunchly conservative, even up as far as the 70s, and then sort of switched over. We'll continue the rest of this. Going on to the next panelist.
This is just hilarious. Yeah, the carrot head wants to figure out who we are.
This is all just waffle.
Well, a lot of it's kind of like futurist thinking, you know. It's like, oh, the way forward. It's bizarre.
It's marketing speak.
Yes, yeah.
We'll just
Mr.
let
Casey.
we'll just let Casey finish. Is it his point? Her point? Is it his? He?
There,
I don't really care, to be honest.
Oh.
go there, and you're safe.
Okay,
Don't
so
do
basically, what I take away from Casey was stay plugged into the machine. Don't look beyond it. Do not even attempt to think beyond it. And because everything is not, we're not broken. Everything is fine. Stay plugged in, and you'll be happy.
Well,
And don't get distracted by cultural issues.
I don't understand why Casey. And I mean this in the nicest way possible. I don't understand why Casey hasn't chosen a different party, because I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't get the impression they're particularly culturally, socially, or fiscally conservative.
I mean, are they somewhat patriotic?
I don't know. I honestly don't. I mean, Casey could be quite physically conservative, so I guess that could explain why. But I mean, at the same time, I do wonder why a lot of them, that I've seen, especially like on Twitter and stuff like Casey and that sort of branch, aren't within the Liberal Democrats, for instance.
Because it's got no power. Like, why would you join the Liberal Democrats?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to it. Yeah.
So people like Casey, they represent a wing of the Conservative Party that have been around really since the 1970s, which is they like business. The bigger the business, the more they like it. And they believe, the corporations kind of drive the engine, they drive the wealth machine. So they're not going to go into Labour, who wants to nationalise everything, because these types want corporations to work with the government, not be owned by them. So there's that. But the other thing is that, yes, like Rory Stewart before him joined the Conservatives because they get things done and the other parties don't.
Well, this is the thing. Like, I get the impression Casey is a member of the Conservatives because the Conservatives have been doing a sterling job of delivering on the things that Casey's interested in.
Yeah.
Which the problem is that's the exact opposite of what most people join the Conservatives for.
Yeah.
But you've got to remember there's a whole social dimension to the Conservative Party. I mean, they do throw some bloody good parties and social events. And what you get is Casey there. He probably wants to make his own wage and be his own boss, and imagining himself as the CEO of some marketing company or something like that.
Inc.
Yeah, and he wants to rub shoulders with, the kind of sophisticated, successful people. And he's not going to find that in Labour, and he's really not going to find that in the Lib, even though ideologically he's probably more in line with the Liberals, but he's not going to want to rub shoulders with them because the ambition isn't there. So he's ended up by default in the Conservative Party, and he's going to make contacts, and he's going to use those contacts, and he's going to possibly make a pretty penny out of it.
Yeah, but there is precedent. I mean, if you look at when you had the whole, I guess, sort of towards the end of Theresa May's career as Prime Minister, you had MPs who were very much on the sort of, I guess, Casey's wing of the party, and the Remain wing, as well, who were hardened Remainers, who ended up leaving to join that Alan Soubry party, the Tiggers, the Cuck party. That's it. And then you had a couple of them end up joining the Lib Dems. When they thought the Conservatives, because you had all like these ridiculous polls that showed that the Lib Dems were actually going to win win, and Joe Swinson was going to be Prime Minister and everything. It was going to be a wonderful time.
That was hilarious.
Yeah, so but that's when you saw the true colours, because of course they sort of jumped shipped and defected.
She did have a absolutely massive set of egos.
Yeah.
But the example of that type of Conservative is Michael Heseltine. Michael Heseltine he got in the mid 60s as an MP, but he really started to rise in the 70s, and he represented this sharp-suited corporate Tory, of which he's the grandfather figure of it.
Yeah, and he is. I do like the story, because I heard that he released a book, and Margaret Thatcher was apparently she was sitting in Chequers, this towards the end of her career, and she was going through each page and circling every bit that was, as she described, like put under like communist or socialist point, and she went through the book bit by bit, sort of picking apart his book. But yeah. He's I met him actually at a debate, and that during the Brexit referendum, and he's a very loathsome individual.
Bring back Maggie Thatcher and Keith Joseph.
Yes,
at least
Norman. Norman Tebbit. I mean, yeah.
Oh, Tebbit, yeah.
Yeah, Tebbit.
Man, legend.
Yeah, he's like Tebbit was like he's like the perfect like vanguard, sort of foot soldier for Thatcher. Very much.
But also Tebbit, it ticks so many boxes. He was the self-made man. A former airline pilot, so he was practical, culturally conservative as well, because he had his cricket, the cricket test, which I still think holds up as a kind of mark of whether you're integrated into society or not. And yes, he for me, and prepared to talk tough and not mince words when something blunt needed to be put across. I mean, people have called me cuck over the years, but I'll just point. Well, Norman Tebbit was my hero in my teenage years. He was he was the guy in the party I looked up to.
And he was loyal to Thatcher right to the end. Like, I don't think he never actually told Thatcher to leave. He was like,
no. He was the guy in Spitting Image that was portrayed in the kind of leather jacket and
like a punk,
Bit of a
yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Anyway, it's 10 to 11, and we've not even made.
Yeah, there are only 3 panelists in.
Yeah, 3 panelists. I
think you can skip over the northern one. I don't know why she's there either. She doesn't seem to know.
Well, she was there to take the message back to Priti Patel that people don't think she's very good at her job.
Yeah, so this one, what's her name? Chloe something or other?
By the way, I'm from the Northeast.
Chloe Grant.
Nobody at any point put forward the reason why I should care what anyone from the Northeast thinks. I mean, we talked to Zen enough.
Yeah, the Northeast.
Yeah, but Zen's like, he's a Twitch streamer, so he might as well be classed in the OnlyFans category of people.
Zen is a thought.
Yes, he's a male thought.
Yeah, she's just said leveling up and net zero. Ugh.
I know, grim.
Well, then she got wrecked on that later.
Because I'm probably going to have to leave shortly, I'm just going to go out here and say that basically the panel on the right of the hosts, Chloe, Casey, did not like, could quite happily cut them out of the party. the panel to the left of the hosts, Luke, Maya, Alice, and to a lesser extent Sam, because I think he's just a bit soundbitey. I would keep. I think they're worth working with, even if
on is Sam.
even if Alice is a raving Catholic.
Well, she said at the end that she wanted a Catholic absolute monarchy as the solution.
Yeah, country love.
That's not going to happen.
Not gonna happen. She'll grow out of that.
I'm not sure she will. She can just go. We'll pack her off to her nunnery or something.
Rory Herbert's talking about having slept with Margaret Thatcher again.
I mean, at this point, I believe him.
Yeah, renewable energies, net zero.
No one cares about net zero. Well, they do. They want it not to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Engage young people on STEM subjects. Yeah.
Just all, again, more buzzwords. Just
yeah.
Well, it's like, to what extent is it the government's purpose to find you a job?
I am amazed.
Well, Maya says that as well.
I am amazed how many people can memorize the Conservative Party manifesto, like off by heart. It's pretty impressive. Because it's
like a three-word buzzword soup.
Yes, pretty much. We'll go to Luke next. Yeah, I mean, I won't delve into Chloe because it was hit and miss.
Mostly miss.
I hope she does better in the future. I hope she's takes this opportunity at this debate to develop something different.
Luke talks quite a lot about liberalism. I feel like that's the American sense. Yeah.
Yes.
We're infected by too much Americanism. I mean, already some of you have been calling governments administrations. Got to cut that out.
Oh yeah, okay, fair enough.
If we have, then I hate it.
I mean, it is. I will state that it could be that Luke is talking about like English liberalism. That he could be referring to that. He may not be referring to like the American liberal, which is what was it, a socialist?
Okay, so liberal as opposed to Tory, as opposed to.
Yeah, I don't think he's referring to. He's not referring to like a social liberalism as in a socialist, because I don't know many people in this country that do refer to them as that.
Well, he's talking about progressivism.
Yeah.
Yeah, the progressive. Yeah.
They have nothing to disagree with you. Why is that? Because they're intellectually incapable of disagreeing with somebody else because they're offended.
I like this.
Yeah.
He
does talk like a politician.
Well, this is why he's in favour of the Conservatives being out of power for a season, because he thinks.
Yeah, I disagree with that bit because I just think
he thinks that will help them
Labour
refocus.
will hit turbo. Labour will hit the turbo button. We couldn't even have this discussion. We couldn't have this live stream if they were in.
Yeah, that's the like double-edged sword of what I understand where he's getting from. It's just.
How are we going to navigate our liberty after COVID? That's a question I wouldn't have asked 12 months ago or 2 years ago. In terms of the economy, in terms of us as economic conservatives, where do we see the future? The autumn statement, I say in October, will be a very interesting point for how much money do we begin to pay back and how do we do so? Very interesting to see when furlough ends, what is our role in Europe, what is our role in the world after Brexit? These are important questions that we need to ask. But yet again, we do not have ideas. So where do I see the party going? To re-engage with ideas. The idea of the family, the ideas of institutions in which we have the important.
Did you see the Conservatives considering a nappy tax today, which is?
I mean, they consider a lot of things, but yes.
Yeah.
Good for the family. Yeah. Good old party.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's
all
in search
round,
of net zero as well, by the way. Just so we.
I mean, all round, I think Luke's point was put forward. I think I think that should be the standard conservative position. To be honest, quite frankly, nothing you said there, I would disagree with. I think the only one that, as Robert pointed out, was of course the party being out of power.
Well,
So
he doesn't say
reminded
that in his opening statement. I think everything he said there is reasonable. This is what I'm saying as well. I think Maya and Luke came across as the strongest. They're very able to express their position convincingly. I just think the people on the left, and maybe I'm being a bit too hard on Jake. He's probably the best out of that bunch. They're just a word salad. They don't really know what they want. They don't really know.
I think you are being a bit harsh to Jake there.
I think Jake does know, and I think
Yeah, I think
if I was going to say the word salad, it would be sorry, let me go. It would be like these three. I would say the ones that are
Jake gets tossed
stumbling
in.
around in the dark.
Poor Jake gets guilt by association because he's sat with them.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
In fact, on that,
I perceive him to be stupider just by being sat with them.
He does look like he's there at the end, looking at Maya and Alice and going, "Why can't I sit with you guys? Look, there's a space between Maya and Alice. Can't I just fit in there?"
Yeah. Very, very sort of like the awkward wedding sort of like table planning. So
he didn't speak either, which I think doesn't help.
Yeah.
I mean, I did find Jake and Maya agreeing on a lot, which was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. It was, as I said, there is a common sort of understanding within the party. It's just that there is an element in there that is, I find to be heavily dismissive of the other group and will actively make a straw man argument against them, accusing people of being something they're not, and they won't engage in a sort of honest and fair way, and that's a shame. That is a shame, because you have this opportunity to come to an event like this, and it's, you're there not just to listen as such, maybe learn a bit, develop some ideas, maybe change your position if needs be. But yeah, we'll continue this point.
Right, as most of you can tell, I'm neither on the orthodox traditional side or the progressive big government, kind of paternalistic side of conservatism. The problem that we have is the party right now. We think that we are debating on this battle of ideas, but generally speaking, the reason the party has been struggling is because the battle is tribalist. It's all about the different tribes. That you're wet, you're dry. You're dry. It's not necessarily on the actual idea. People think that they're actually debating the idea and the values, whether again, like a Theresa Mayite, paternalistic, progressive side, or more of a Thatcherite side. It's actually essentially both sides are attacking each other and saying, "Well, you're not one of us, or you're one of us." That's why the Tory party has just been struggling. Right now, we can all agree the Tory party and the government are a wet blanket. They don't really know what they're actually doing. They don't know how right-wing they should be and how left-wing they should be. So they create this pick and mix thing, which is essentially just big government, without them even wanting to be big government, because they know that they can rely on ordinary people who tend to be closer to security over liberty, unless security goes too far and people then want their liberty back. So right now, we're still going towards the security level of a society. So of course, if you come out, offer them free money or investment, it's all the same thing. People just change the words. It's still handouts. Even if you call it aid or investment or infrastructure, it's all handouts. When you have both sides somehow both advocating for essentially government involvement into your life, that's the problem that we have. It's not really, and it's not these sides. I'm talking about the actual inside the party. So you got the dried and wet. So unless you could embrace what ordinary people really want out there, which is cultural conservatism. People want basic values, family values, your flag and border and the Queen. They don't have to be completely hardcore monarchists, but then they still believe in the concept. And socially speaking, they people want basic support, so safety net we can compromise that can still exist. We don't have to go completely anarcho-libertarian. We can still compromise. But in reality, people just want government to get out of their life. So economically, no one is brave enough to embrace free market capitalism. And that's the problem that we have. And there's no party that can actually do this right now. You would think that the Tory party is still the biggest platform that can do it. The Lib Dems probably had the chance when they were created after the Liberal Party, especially in the 90s. They could have been that party if they'd embraced cultural conservatism, not social conservatism, cultural conservatism, basic values of all the things that obviously you guys obviously always say. At the same time, let people be. Don't get involved with their lives. The government should just be there to make sure that no one is harming anybody else. That's all. Internal security and, of course, defense. And the rest of it is just justice system. Make sure that no one's harming anybody else.
So, what do we make of that?
Very in favour, yeah.
Big fan.
Yeah, it's the pragmatic position, which I'm mostly on board with that.
Tusi's not pragmatic. He wants to abolish the central bank.
Government, get out of my life.
Yeah, get out of my, it's the basic thing. Get out of my life. Just look after the defense and internal security. Look after the law courts and just get out.
Yes,
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for small government. I think that, is a fair point. What do you think about the difference that he has between the cultural conservatism and the social conservatism? Because, I mean, as I said, the first time that I've really seen cultural conservatism being talked about, it was in Roger Scruton's book on conservatism, and
Meyer's less of a conservative and more of a libertarian.
He's definitely a libertarian. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say libertarian. Yeah.
I mean, I think he comes from the. I think he comes from the perspective that libertarianism originated from, which is people perceive libertarianism in isolation, but they fail to, and when they do that, they fail to recognise that it grew organically out of a culturally Christian, culturally conservative society. So I think he's a conservative in that sense, but he's not a conservative in the sense of sort of like high Toryism, anything like that.
I think cultural conservatism could be the thing to win on and build on, because a lot of people talked about social conservatism, and that seems like trying to wind the clock.
It's American.
It's an American thing. It's trying to wind back a clock, the clock back to a time that people haven't got an accurate image of. Whereas on cultural conservatism, you're saying no, the things that are the continuity of our culture, our nation, are important, and I think that's a big winner with the general public.
Yeah, so to me, social conservatism strikes of. I mean, I know that they define it differently, but to me, it's like you have to choose an issue and take a side on that issue. Like you say, if you're a social conservative, you think this about abortion and gun control, and it always goes towards American things.
Well, that's the problem with libertarianism. I think a lot of it is tarred with the American version of libertarianism.
I'm trying to figure out myself is how to disentangle the Americanism from it.
Yeah. I would say that British libertarianism is more like something like minarchism, which
I think it's what me and Harry have been trying to kind of pin down for a while, because that's what we were trying to identify with.
Yeah. I think Meyer was on point with this one as well. I think he put across something which I think is definitely something which is worth trying. I think as a plan going forward, combating the progressive menace would be something that would definitely be worthy sort of thing for the right to unite behind. You just have to have a clear defining sort of thing of what is cultural conservatism. I mean, as it go back to Roger Scruton, one thing that he talked about relentlessly was actually beauty and architecture and stuff like that, and buildings, and the importance of why places like cities and such should have like this certain aesthetic state with them. So So you'd have to formulate policies around what what would cultural conservatism look like?
Well, it's
so
the
maybe some
question
sort of
John's asked.
I don't know.
But that's something you asked. So we'll go to the next speaker then. I think it's Alice. This one.
The number of simps in the chat at this point.
She is comely.
That's one word for it.
She's 19, rubber. Calm down.
It's the problem, Joz. You get older, but they don't.
Oh my god! I'm telling your wife.
There's no point telling my wife I'm married older.
Ah, shit. That's her life.
Listening to what people are saying and to work in manufacturing and you're firmly conservative. And I think as a nation, we obviously have so much to be proud of and we have such an incredible heritage and culture. And why aren't we?
Yeah, I think Alice is good at her identification of problems, but her solution of Catholic absolute monarchy is hilarious.
She made a really awful point about plastic bags as well, because she doesn't understand how businesses work.
Oh, was that? Yeah, that's the what we pay for that.
Yeah.
She's mentioned the slow march through the institutions. Glad somebody got round to that.
Yeah.
No, so she's probably underrated, I think.
Oh, this is what I'm saying. She made some rookie errors, but she's young, right? The three strongest members were definitely Luke, Maya, and Luke Tusi, and Luke, Maya, and Alice.
Yeah.
I think also Alice is kind of 5 years behind someone like Emma Webb in terms of formulating ideas and articulating them.
Yeah. I mean, she was very much focused on the long march institutes, especially universities and schooling, and that's a very important point because going forward, no matter what sort of branch of forget the progressives for a second, but the branch of conservatism you want to follow, whether it be the standard conservatism or cultural conservatism or social conservatism, you're going to have to sort the education system and the institutions out because what's creating what gives the left its life force and what keeps it going is the universities and is those institutions because it indoctrinates, of course.
This has been a problem for a very long time, particularly in the universities.
Yeah,
it's not a problem. It's not a problem it's not a Blairite problem. It's just not a Blairite problem before that.
But it's more. I think it's more obvious now. And in terms of the left has got to the point of.
It's possibly more obvious because you're virtually compelled to attend university, whereas 50 years ago, most people didn't ever set foot on a university campus.
But also the left has adopted this. People will refer to as the woke ideology, which is, as we discussed before many times, race and identity communism, and that is extremely destructive compared to what was being talked about 30 plus years ago.
The biggest coup of Blair was not infecting the universities or anything like that. It was just making sure that everyone had to go to university.
Well, yeah,
the university had long been a breeding ground of socialist thought. This just made sure that everyone had to get their dose of it.
Yeah. I think there was a big part of indoctrinating a wider population to make his reforms more palatable. I think that's definitely something that could be derived from that. And so we've got the last guest, which was, of course, Sam from the Mallard.
Well, like so many things in this world, the roots of the problem for Conservative parties I mean, it's not so much a case that they don't know what they stand for, they don't care. The party that preached take back control cannot control the borders. The party that promises freedom does nothing but feed the galumping, bureaucratic leviathan that we call the state. We also have a scenario where conservatism has basically been used interchangeably with moderation, and thus it has allowed the Conservative Party to do two things that it loves more than anything else: climb and management. They are managerial ists, they are decliners, and they believe in managed decline. The only way that this party, and indeed the wider Conservative movement, can actually face the problems and the challenges of tomorrow today is by following through on its own logic. If moderation is the key to all of life, then perhaps moderation can moderate itself once in a while. Instead, what we require is not gathering around this little centre ground that doesn't exist, engaging in this battle of ideas that no one can even define the terms of. What we should instead do is embrace a new form of radicalism, a new form of conservatism that isn't just afraid to speak its own name, but is actually willing to knock over everything in its path so it stands a threat to the Britain that we love.
Okay. So that was Sam's point. Quite interesting. So I do think he is right when he says the party is indifferent. I think the party is indifferent. There is I mean, I don't want to say snobbery, but when you see the party and certain aspects of the party, the way they treat the like constituency bases outside of the capital, the metropolitan centre, or when I joined the party at least, there was this element of indifference, of snobbery, and expectation of what central office says this, you do this, and shut up.
The parties. The problem is the party's been rewarded for this indifference. In 2010, when it promised to reduce net migration to the tens of thousands. I think it was as far back as then, and it didn't. It wasn't punished for it, and because of that, it knows that it doesn't need to fulfil promises around tricky things like that. And the thing you could argue is, well, the poor Conservatives they couldn't control migration because we're a member of the EU, but of course in that same period the number of migrants from outside of the EU increased, and any party that was promising to reduce migration, that would be an obvious way to reduce migration, because you've got full control over migrants that come from outside of the EU. But of course, we saw it go up rather than down.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's the British public's fault. We vote for reasons, and then when those reasons aren't delivered, we don't punish them at the ballot box. And I know Robert won't like to hear that because we don't want.
I would say now there is no alternative. I've been saying this for years, that okay, you're disgruntled. You want to tear up your Tory party membership. You want to vote for someone else, but who? This is everybody's gone. I tweeted in response to something Calvin Robinson put out, and I said all voting options lead you to left-leaning Green. Every single one, and so and he agreed with me. So this is the problem. So what you have to do is okay, that's the limitations. Let's think of some other ideas other than I'm not voting for them again. We got to start thinking of other solutions.
No, and I'm not saying I think it's really silly to say that you'd never vote for a party. Because if that party was the one that most represented what you thought, even if 50 years ago you said, "Oh, I'll never vote for them," then you're silly not to change your view, because when the issue that was of most importance in the 70s was the EU, he knocked Powell pinned his colours to the mast and said, actually, on this occasion, when it comes to the very sovereignty of this nation, actually, it makes sense to vote for the party that I wouldn't normally advocate for.
Galloway said to vote Conservative.
Yeah.
At the recent elections, what I've done is I'm not voting for someone. I've ended up voting to keep the people I'm really scared of out. If that makes sense.
That goes back into what one of the members of the panel said. Then that is democracy working.
What is the political solution at that point?
That's a good point.
Well, the solution.
I believe that
politics yourself.
The problem is the media, because nobody can start up a party and run and get traction if the media don't somehow think, Okay, yeah.
Let's just say hypothetical. Okay, hypothetical. Tomorrow, Boris Johnson wakes up and does what's something that'd be unpopular in the media that the media would run 24-hour coverage and attack him relentlessly.
He shuts the borders.
Yeah,
His nose in the wrong way.
Okay. Look, actually, here's a good one. He wakes up tomorrow and he orders the foreign office or the Royal Navy to collect migrants up and then drop them back off at French ports. Now he could do that. There was a border security former boss there who actually said that is something that could be done. It would anger the French. It would cause international tensions between us and France. But regardless, that's something that could be done. It would be immensely popular amongst us and the wider sort of voter base. I think it'd be very popular amongst the conservative voter base and in general, the population in general.
The really difficult thing with all this is in the 70s we severed our ties with the world and widened our ties with Europe, and that primarily meant France. And we did stupid things like building a Channel tunnel, which means that we're overly reliant on relations with France, and we really have very little in common with France ever since the revolution.
But if
it's just such a stupid thing to do.
But on the hypothetical, if he did something like that, we all know what, and then that would, of course, there'd be a huge media storm. There would be, there would no doubt be protests. There would be round-the-clock coverage, and you would see Tory scum and Tory Nazis and all that sort of stuff trending non-stop. Now, what if, say, he just ignored it? What do you think would happen? I mean, you would have the usual people in the party, the Wets, coming out to criticise him for this decision, but at the same time, what would happen? Would anything happen?
I think the influence of the media is way overstressed, and I think there's far too many spads who look at some mainstream press coverage and worry about it, fret about it. And you got to remember that Boris is also a media man himself. That's his background.
Yeah, this is why it's just why I'm surprised he's performed so poorly when it comes to media, because one would have thought that he would just be like, yeah, whatever,
But that's not the case. He's one of them, and he knows them. He knows them personally. He knows them extremely well. They know him. They've got dirt on him. He's it's. So he I'm trying to find an analogy, but if you've been in an industry for such a long time and you've got to know people, and even if you kind of walked away, you will always look kind of fondly. There's a little bit of nostalgia. There's a little bit of you can't quite sever the ties.
I mean, I understand because I have been around Notting Hill set conservatives. They've even been up there for meals and what have you. I do get there is a subculture there that's very deep rooted and very interconnected, especially within the city itself.
What I don't understand is, but Boris played it exactly right, and maybe this was Dominic Cummings' influence. He played it exactly right over the election, which was to basically pick and choose which media you're going to have anything to do with, and you just ignore the rest. Well,
he did Facebook. He actually cut out the middleman for most of the campaign. Just did Facebook and
pick who you're going to engage with and ignore whatever anyone else is saying in the media, because it's worthless at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know why you would do anything with the BBC or any company, any outlet at all now.
Well, when it comes to the BBC, any company that's the primary purchaser of the Guardian newspaper, I don't know why you have anything to do with.
Yeah, this is the thing that has to be broken. I mean, if you want to start putting back together democracy, I mean, for me, democracy is about, well, how do we get a government that has some kind of mandate without using violence and force, and how do you change it without using violence and force? That's what democracy means to me. It's that kind of it's kind of, how do you go from one government to the next without violence? And
an election is a bloodless civil war. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah. but having said that, I think the biggest problem of democracy is optics,
You end up in
media,
a society where
and
opinion rules.
and kind of think tanks that look at things through a media lens.
Well,
That's the
anyone who
biggest
controls
problem.
public opinion is the person who rules.
I do agree with the think tanks because they see them in the media. They are the core sort of problem. The sort of core problems with parties and how they come across. Like with messaging, I think I've noticed because the problem is they, policies like net zero and all that sort of stuff that you hear is sort of like hammered out or be a build back better or whatever. This is the sort of stuff that comes out of these group thinkings and such, and it's all data analyzing and everything, and I don't think it has the same effect on the population like it would have done 10 years ago.
Well, I'll give you an example of what I mean by the malevolent influence of media on democracy and politics in this country. It seems like it's a small issue, but it was when Dominic Raab was asked if he would ever take the knee. And he said he would only ever take the knee. He only ever took the knee to propose to his wife, and he would take the knee when being knighted by the Queen or getting an honor from the Queen. And he said that's the only two things. And you look how the media trying to spin that, push that. He's unworthy of office. He's unworthy of being an elected representative because he won't take the knee. He won't tip his hat to Black Lives Matter. That's the kind of thing. That's not reporting either. That's not these things happened and this is us, the journalists, relaying what has actually happened to the public. This is just purely narrative driven. And while we have a narrative driven media, we can't have a functioning democratic system that enables governments to change but allows governments to get on with the job. You're in for a few years, get on with it.
So the free press was a mistake then?
The free press was a great idea, and it did work up until, and I trace this probably back to the 1980s, when the culture of reporting and journalism in this country changed. And I do recommend watching a video, a discussion between Robin Aitken and Charles Moore on this, because Charles Moore has nailed this thing that when Mrs. Thatcher was Prime Minister, the media changed into a narrative-driven media.
I see Fez is referencing in the chat here Nixon, who famously said in one of his White House tapes, remember to one of his aides, I think it was one of his aides or something, it was remember this, the media is the enemy, the media is the enemy. And he said you need to repeat that 100 times before you sort of understand that for something conservatives cannot get away with that people on the left can. Like you see in America, Democrats can get away evidently with a lot of stuff compared to Republicans, and that's just a fact of life. And so that's why it is helpful to always approach a situation where the media is the enemy. They're not your allies, they're not your friends, they're not neutral arbiters, they are pure enemy. I mean, go back to Sam though. One thing I will say, which I do disagree on one of his points, where when he says the Conservatives know what they want, but they are indifferent because they don't know what to do it. You take someone like Chloe there. It's quite evident that she doesn't know conservatism as a ideology. She doesn't know what it is, or she doesn't know how to. Okay, I'll reframe that because I could be wrong. She might know what she could know what it is, but she doesn't know how to articulate it in a way which is
which isn't socialism.
Well, which isn't separate also from the party line. Quite frankly, which isn't socialist. I mean, she couldn't. I don't think she would. She isn't talking about like Burke or anything like that, or Scruton or whatever. She's very much just said what the party line was.
Give
now.
Jobs.
Sorry, Josh.
Conservative is when you give people jobs.
Yeah. And And that sort of mentality, I mean, like in my local bit here, in the local party, that sort of trail of thought that Chloe was saying is pretty much the majority. And I'm pretty certain, unfortunately, with many conservative associations, that is the majority position among members as well. In some, when I say that they're not, they're not like, if you compare Labour to how in tune they are with sort of left wing theory, I mean, all the members are pretty much read. They're all sort of on board. They know what the sort of ideology is about and the core issues of it. And then you look at the Conservatives and the Conservative Party. I don't think they are at least most of them aren't that well understanding of it. I mean, and what's amazing is someone referenced in chat you with Roger Scruton was when that lie was put out about him, about the comments he made when he was to be appointed. I think it was under May, or was it Cameron?
It was May.
No, it was May.
May. The lie that was put out about him, and the first people to really, really turn on him was Conservative politicians like Johnny Mercer, who's an absolute scumbag, and I really have no time for Johnny in any capacity. And these are the same people that would criticise you from doing blue on blue as well, and did with Theresa May when they were defending her. And I mean, absolute reprehensible people. But the problem is, they will cast out their own. They are willing enough to cast out their own people who are a huge asset. I mean, someone like Scruton he is worth 1 million times more than the average Conservative MP. He really was.
Well, I think there's two things that come from that. First of all, someone like Mercer, who really wasn't aware of Scruton, hadn't read any of his stuff, wasn't aware of the chap, was told by, I don't know if it was by a SPAD or that, again, he was looking at it through the media optics. Somebody, the lie was put out in the New Statesman. It was brought to Johnny Mercer's attention, and he went along with the media narrative or the SPAD narrative or whoever it was. He didn't bother to do any research himself, and he admitted, I didn't know who Roger Scruton was. I don't know what he said. I don't know.
But don't you think it's worrying that the party doesn't brief its MPs on stuff like this?
But you worry about who is briefing them.
But this is why I ended up doing this channel, and why. But this is why I ended up doing this channel and contacting you guys and getting involved in this political sphere, because I joined the Conservative Party and I was sort of in Johnny Mercer's position, because I didn't know much about Conservative ideology apart from bare basics, I guess you could say, of the party, what the party machine was telling me. And this is about 5 years ago now. And that's why, because I thought to myself, actually, how can I be part of something if I literally know nothing of its core people, philosophers, and people in and around conservatism as a ideology, a separate entity of the party. And that's why I mean, I don't want to use this phrase because I really dislike it, but educate oneself. That was something I couldn't, because I felt ill-equipped. I felt that if I was in a room with my peers, I would be ill-equipped if I did not know what I was talking about, and that's something that I don't know. I can't really fathom why some Conservatives are like that. Just something I can't really fathom.
Well, the thing is that the other thing about Conservatives, as opposed to progressivism and leftism in general, is that I believe conservatism is largely instinctive. It's not something that you go to a book to learn about.
It's a natural point.
It is nowadays.
It's a natural state of being.
Yes.
I think John and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, that in the animal kingdom, most animals are conservative. They know their territory. They know their pack. And we follow the same thing. You know that instinctively a family is a good thing. You know instinctively that your environment and your nation and your cultural heritage is a good thing. You know that your your individuality is important. That's instinctive, and you know that perhaps going out there, making a mark on the world, having your own little piece of the earth, and doing a job and getting remunerated for it. These are all instinctive things. Whereas progressivism, the reason why they have all these books, and you have to read Robin DiAngelo, you have to read Das Kapital, is because it has to be indoctrinated. It's not natural. It doesn't feel natural.
It's,
So
it's the whole left can't mean thing with the paragraphs of text for a single joke.
Yeah, exactly. They're left because this has to be indoctrinated. So it's almost to pick up Sowell or to pick up Scruton or any of the, or Burke. You know, it feels counterintuitive. It's like I know I just broadly agree with them. I don't need to read them. Just give me the taster notes. You know, the Cliff Notes version. That's how I think a lot of Conservative Party members feel. But I think we should go back to the books. We should go back to. We should have core texts.
Well, the reason they become important is because something like the Conservative Party has become so detached from the lineage and the heredity that it has, such that for someone on the outside looking in, it becomes difficult to understand and align your kind of instinctive conservatism with the kind of creature that you're presented with as being representative of that.
I mean, you take something like The Family, which I think is, it's one of the things that conservatism, if conservatism could take one idea and expand on it and build everything from it, it's the idea of the family, the nuclear family unit being a good and a positive thing. Is that you look at children, and if they grow up in a kind of nuclear family, unless something comes along to interfere with that, they will always have that bond, that love, that trust within the family.
Even
unless something comes in.
Well, even if the parent's terrible, like.
But most, I interact with parents all the time. You know, the other parents. I would say most parents are basically decent. You know, they've got a child. They want to be responsible for that child. They want to care for that child. They want good things to happen to that child. And the children, you know, despite naughtiness and testing boundaries and testing patience, you know, when there's trouble, that child will go to its parents. This is a basic, fundamental thing. And if you have all this anti-family movement and passing on your genes and anti-childbirth, that's not instinctive. That has to be indoctrinated. That has to be drilled in. And you want to break that chain. You try and find where that is, and break the connection between a child and the person telling them that their family is wrong and that they're wrong. They're wrong for existing.
Well, this is kind of a sad thing. Like, I look at this panel and I'd love to be corrected, but this is the Conservative future, but not one of them is busy passing on that lineage to, the next generation.
Well, as far as they're concerned, despite being in their mid to late 20s, they are the next generation.
I mean,
no, they're not. A generation ago, they would be the generation raising.
That's what I'm saying, as far as they're concerned.
Yeah. John, don't underestimate the power that autists have when they're alone. I mean, it goes back to like these sort of like autist monks, but spend their entire lifetime.
I don't get the relevance of that.
Well, I'm just saying, thought leaders. I mean, okay, if we take these people as future thought leaders in the conservative movement, or maybe a couple of them, maybe not all of them, obviously, but a couple of them, it could be that their purpose in life is not to create, for family.
I don't see how they can adequately talk about cultural conservatism without any kind of, I don't know,
personal stake in it.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Personal. Yeah. now, some quite important things.
It's
Levied against May, and
it's all very well and good talking about the family, but their revealed preference is that they've got more important things to do. And
without sounding incredibly classist, but there's sort of the wider population who aren't political and who aren't engaged in this sort of stuff and who aren't engaged in politics in general. This is sort of people that they're sort of talking about here. And we know them. Yeah, we know them in our average life and everything. I mean, this is about how do we get them to do this, or how do we get them to encourage them to do this?
Well, not by these lot. This lot seem more interested in drinking Prosecco.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to be overly critical, and some of them I'm sure are still in university or whatever, and that's fine. But some of them are probably nudging towards 30, and it's like, well, I get there might be a class thing or whatever that means that different groups tend to do things at different ages, but this.
Well, it goes back to the sort of like the thing. Men have more leniency when it comes to settling down with a family. They can do it a lot later in life than, of course, women. I mean, women have
the traditional thing is they would tend to be later, like I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I wouldn't be. I mean, if it was like a man in his 30s who was still doing this, didn't have a family, I wouldn't be like. It wouldn't be a completely sort of undermining his own argument. Let's say, but if it was a man who was sort of in his 60s or what have you, I mean, yeah, I guess one could argue, yes, but yeah, again, it's about.
I just see it
biological fact, but about on the matter. But
I'm not much older than most of these people, but I just see a panel of kids who have no real life experience telling me about life experience, and it's just a bit weird. Because they're not kids, and they wouldn't have been kids 20 years ago or 40 years ago. They would have been, some of them would probably be 2-3 kids in, and they wouldn't still be mucking around at the weekend.
Yeah, remember, this is young conservatives. We can't have 70-year-olds in the young conservatives shop.
Young conservatives is defined as under 25.
Well, young conservatives technically don't. I don't think they even really exist anymore, to be honest.
No, there is a group. I looked into it, but it was under 25s only.
Yeah, well, yeah, historically wise, yeah. I mean, we'll probably wrap it up in a sec. So, just before we wrap it up, we'll sort of just we'll finish the sort of stream now, because what ended up happening was they I think they had a discussion about points, and then it sort of the stream ceased. They had a 20-minute break, and then they came back for Q&A. And the Q&A bit was actually quite interesting because Joz, we'll go through. So, Joz, you asked, how do you define social conservatism? Am I correct with that point?
Yes. Well, yeah. I asked a great many things, serious and not serious, but that was the one they picked.
So, do you think? How did you find the answer? Do you think they answered it?
It was Mr. Doherty that went into that, wasn't it? Mainly, he was talking. I mean, he basically pulled up Scruton, which is the similar sort of thing I've heard you and John talking about.
Mm.
So I think it was a decent answer from him, but it's something that they kind of need to lead with, in my opinion. Their whole thing seems to be just spamming the word social conservative.
I still think it came across as quite nebulous. I still don't think they really pinned it down.
No, they haven't pinned. I mean, I was going to say, I think widely, I don't think it's been pinned down. But then again, I don't blame them, because nobody. I mean, we haven't pinned it down. So I mean, I'm not going to be chucking.
Well, we're not trying to. We're not trying to. We're not basing our entire thing around it.
No. I'm not talking about the Wellington Project as a whole. I'm talking about us individually. I mean, when we streamed about this before, I haven't pinned it down, because it is. I mean, I think Carl Benjamin, he talked about the Lotus Eaters. It's a really hard thing to pin down, and I think the closest thing we've come to, as we've just said, is that it is natural. It's a natural instinct in many ways, and it's something that, I mean, because it's natural, it can't really be learned. It can be unlearned, and if you go down the sort of lefty progressive route.
Well, it seems like a dumb thing to base your entire group around, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Something you can't even define.
Well, it's something.
You can define it. They're just too scared to, because of optics.
Okay, yes.
It's true. It's optics. Everybody's scared of optics.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah.
Not being scared of that, and you can define it.
Fuck your optics, I'm going in, Rubber 2021.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I guess social conservatism, pro-family, pro-Christianity, love my God, love my Jesus, love my faith. There you go. What are you going to do now?
You can actually define conservatism by taking like one sentence that about 2/3 of that panel said, and you could define it. So you could take the bit from Alice about the defending institutions. You can take a bit from Maya Tuzi about government should defend the country and just leave everybody alone. You could just take statements from 2/3 of them.
Yes.
And you could work out a definition of conservatism and go, that's it. That's who we are.
But do you think the reason why is because the optics is because there is like, whether it's ingrained or whether it's just, I mean, ingrained maybe for younger generation, I don't know, that if to talk about it, it's somewhat strange. I don't know. Do you understand what I mean?
The only reason it would be strange is because they're frightened, and then
hang on a sec. We've all been, or maybe not you so much, but we've been through the education system during Blair's time, for example.
Yeah.
So our understanding of the world will naturally be, because I mean, I remember, looking back through my time through the education system, we read a lot. We had to read a lot of books which were very, I guess, retrospectively looking back, were quite subversive with sort of left-wing thought, and sort of always promoting sort of rebel, the 60s sort of civil rights rebel sort of ideology sort of stuff. That's why I'm wondering, do you think there is, like, with that, it's ingrained into you, that like, or like sort of on the subconscious level of not disgust but avoidance, that it's because it feels not say cringe, but
well, you're probably at school, and it was similar, when I was going through school in the 80s. But then the reaction was against Reagan and Thatcher. So the education system was trying to promote things that were opposed to Reagan and Thatcher. But the thing is that it creates this dichotomy, and I think that's what leads to this uncomfortableness in talking about conservatism. Is on the one hand, you're thinking deep down in your thoughts, no, conservatism is it's the proper way, it's the natural way, it's the way things should be. But at the same time, you're just aware that there's this level of authority above you that is going to stomp on you if you articulate it. And I think that's where a lot of people are paralyzed. And that's why we have, the silent conservatives, the people who won't talk about how they voted, the people who don't want to put signs up in their front garden on election time. This is where
you're right. Being socialist is consequence-free in 21st century Britain, but being a conservative risks everything.
And so on the second, there was another question in between, which was a member of the audience, which I forget, but he had my question afterwards, which was about the sort of green agenda, and it went
horribly. Yeah.
Sorry.
That was probably one of the worst answered questions.
Yeah, because I wanted to see
Because
how
they did the whole, I don't think any of us would deny climate change. Anyone here put your hands up if you're climate
because this was a bit of a test one, because I wanted to see if the panel could distinguish between green politics and sort of the conservative take on environmentalism and conserving environmental, conserving sort of the sort of agricultural, rural environment, from that perspective.
Well,
so I wanted
they're all metropolitan, yuppies, so we shouldn't be so surprised that they were pretty awful on that one.
Well, I just wanted a confirmation from it. I wanted to see how it get. So the first person they went to was the
Northerner.
No, what's the carrot?
Casey.
Casey. They went to Casey. Now Casey was ended up saying
Be kind.
climate denial. That how can we have this conversation if we can't accept that the climate change is real? So Casey automatically went to the sort of the straw man. So I actually went to a very sort of common lefty tactic. So to question policy decision, you're a denier. You're a conspiracy theorist. It's a very common left-wing trait to sort of delegitimize your argument and sort of make you sound like you're effectively invalid and sort of somewhat crazy. And I wasn't surprised that Casey made that, to be honest, came out with that. I was good. I was actually quite glad that Maya sort of turned around and said, "Hang on a sec, because I think he did point out the sort of difference between the green agenda and environmentalism, and again,
the libertarian was the only one to do that.
Yeah, they really, he really was, and I think also Chloe talked about sort of government targets and net zero, because effectively it did create a bit of an argument between the two factions of, the net zero and the sort of that's been pushed by the government, and actually the sort of cost factor to it. That does it actually does there's any benefit to it at all? I don't know. What are you guys' takes on that?
Was it in response to this question that Alice Grant got onto the plastic bags, or was that a different question?
That was different. I think that was earlier on. This one was just on the.
No, I don't. I don't think it was. But
well, it might have been included. I can't fully remember, to be honest. If Alice mentioned plastic bag, may have done perfectly well. All I remember though is that.
Well, it was the idea that we should make companies pay for this, and it's like, well, Alice, I know you're young, but who do you think funds? I mean, where do you think the companies get the money from to pay for that? You dunce.
Okay, so
you buy shit from them.
Yeah, Mitch, who was just saying we have reached the end. I'm not going through the rest of it because, as I said, there.
To be fair, it's not 2 hours either. If you watch it,
there's like a huge
hour.
Yeah, there's like a huge gap. Like here you go, huge gap of nothing. Okay, so call you Jets. Yeah, so I mean that was quite interesting. And then the final bit was a question from the audience, where basically saying, does I think it was effectively, does any of this matter if we end? It goes back to the thing of conservatism, progressivism driving at the speed limit sort of thing, and does it matter? We've already been defeated, so it's only point to any of this.
This was Sam's moment, wasn't it?
This was Sam's moment because he went into sort of. I guess he was sort of like
did a bit of oratory.
Well, he sort of went into like a mini sort of Ian Paisley mode, I think. But yeah, he was saying no, it's not over effectively, and yeah, he's right, it isn't over. I don't think it's ever over. I do think it is over though for the sort of corporate liberal consensus of conservatives and the progressive wing. I think it is over for them. I think it was over quite some time ago, and I think that they're just sort of like the leather skin suit that's still sort of latching on to the party, and it's just there's nothing that for them it is over.
I think you're optimistic there.
Well, I think it's over for them in the sense that there's only decline. If they remain in the future in the next like 5 years in control of the party, I do think it will lead to gradual. I mean, they will be the ones to kill off the party.
I don't think it will be gradual, to be honest. I think the Conservatives are one bad news cycle, and maybe this is why they are so concerned about optics. I think they're one bad news cycle away from losing the lead that they've currently got.
I don't think they'll lose. I don't think they'll lose all their seats all in one game, one election. I think it'll be gradual.
I think the momentum in the party is shifting towards the culturally conservative, and I think, and it has been since the debacle with the pro-Remain Tories and in 2019, and I think when they got either lost their seats in the election, or they were booted out by their associations, or they felt they should quit before they were replaced. What's happened now is that there's a rump of those still in the Conservative Party. I think they haven't got the momentum behind them. I think they will lie low, bide their time, and look to their media contacts for salvation.
Yeah,
it does feel like quite a large rump.
Yeah, but then again, they realize that they haven't got the momentum on their side. They'll probably bury themselves in the green agenda. They'll probably become the big cheerleaders for that, and then still cozy up to the media. And then at some point, when they feel strong enough, which is probably in about possibly 5 years' time, they'll launch try and launch a takeover.
Well, I don't think they need to launch takeover at the minute. One of their largest rumps is currently in the pole position.
I mean, yeah.
But I just think with the voter base, they're lying low because they know they don't have the voter base behind them.
Well, for a takeover, definitely not at this point. There's no way. But it goes back to what I said, that if say at the next election the Liberal Democrats win much of Southern England, the sort of Remain voting areas of Southern England, and you have like a Liberal Democrat resurgence at the expense of the Conservatives, I do think you'll see Conservatives leave the part, like the sort of more liberal wings. If they think the party's no longer viable in winning elections, they will leave.
Well, it will be more if they think they've got a chance in this other party. They will leave. Yeah.
But look at the former speaker, who was a Conservative MP as well. What's his name? John Bercow.
Now a Labour.
Yeah, he joined Labour. Now, I mean, it is important to remember he did when he became Speaker back in 2008? Was it 2008?
Don't know.
Sometime around there, he did, when he became Speaker, he did officially leave the Conservative Party, and he hadn't been a member since when he joined Labour for quite some time. But it does say something, because I mean, like in that instance, I would say that he didn't change his philosophy. I think it just remained the same, but he was greatly disliked in the party, so it was more viable for him to join the Labour Party. Also, better chance for him to become a Lord as well.
I love how they still haven't. They've still said no.
Yeah, that was pretty good, to be honest. But overall, guys, let's just sum this up. How would you rate the panel? Do you think that this was a pretty good event? Because to be honest, I actually think there was good part. I think the opening and especially the Q&A bit, I do think especially the Q&A bit was really good, because it actually did force them to have a bit of dialogue with each other, and disagreements, and you actually saw those disagreements, whether it was on like social conservatism or on the sort of the green agenda stuff, because you actually did see the sort of two clashing, which I thought was something that it's what I, God damn it, it's what I came to see.
I'll
I guess it's
reserve judgment until I've watched it fully.
Okay.
Although I will say that the only thing that disappoints me there is that, like what we said, there's nobody representing the young married faction.
Well, I could be wrong. I would love to be proven wrong, but I don't get the impression.
It's possible that some of them, one of them might be married. To be honest, most of these people, apart from Maya, who you know from YouTube and such, but most of the other ones, I don't really know much about them, to be honest. First time, even some of them were in chat, during the stream, like Jake and such, and Luke. So I don't know them. I've only heard of them recently. So
the thing is, even if none of themselves are, in the position to do that at the moment, it wouldn't do them harm to broaden their horizons and spend time with people that aren't young conservatives, because that's how you pass on, information from old to young, and people with these broader experiences. I don't think it would hurt them to have.
Hence my continual presence on these live streams.
YMCA. Go to the YMCA in your local community, everyone.
No. Joz, do you want to give your view, or?
Yeah, Joz. You saw the stream.
The whole. I think this whole event was a net positive. I was quite, I guess, vocal with them. I got into a bit of trouble with them before they did the event.
Yeah, you decided to sort of kick the hornet's nest a bit, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But it was better than I expected.
Upset the orthodoxy.
Well, someone's got to do it. It's not a particularly tough job, but
Okay.
No.
Okay. No throwing shade. No throwing shade tonight. Well, thank you very much.
Hold on. I didn't get to give my view.
Go on, pal. What's your opinion?
Go on, give your view. I'm certain you did, but go on, give your view.
I did at the start. No, I thought it was reasonably well done. I think as a first kind of throw of the dice, it was good. Good introduction to a few of these different kind of groups that are popping up. Obviously, there will be one in particular that pops up soon that's gonna blow the competition away, but it's nice to have them around paving the ground. I think it suffered for having such a large panel. I think half the size panel would have been more than adequate and would have allowed more time to
maybe like 4 panelists, I guess.
This guy...
getting the clout from Maya Tusi and the eye candy in the middle was probably a good move, I reckon.
I mean, you can't see the two in the middle, and one of them sounds like a harpy. So.
And also, like, next time, move Jake to the middle. Get him away from the progressive lot on the left there. Move him to the bit more to the middle. I would say definitely more of this Blue Beyond and Orthodox Conservatives and Mallards, more of these sort of panels, because it's definitely interesting.
It was very interesting to hear their views on immigration, for example, because you get the impression that the youth don't really care about this as an issue. But obviously,
I would also say that. Sorry, finish your point.
No, that is kind of my point.
Okay. One thing that I have kind of noticed is that we're kind of coming at this from different directions, in that we're kind of coming from the internet outwards, and they're kind of coming from outwards onto the internet, if that makes sense. In that they're more IRL focused.
Mm-hmm.
More obviously anonymous on the internet focused, or semi-anonymous on the internet focused. We've all come out of a relatively, it started off as a relatively libertarian community, I suppose.
I for one, have never been libertarian. What such awful claims that you give.
We all came out of following a certain academic.
Yeah.
Which obviously it's an internet community, right? Whereas
Yeah.
these come from obviously young conservative associations and that sort of thing. I don't know whether that's fair to say, but they are more.
They're they're probably more grounded in reality than we are. Yes, I get you.
That's kind of is that we're both kind of converging to the same point, and it's interesting for me to see people from the outside coming to the same conclusions that we have come to on the internet.
Yeah, that is something that is quite. It just reinforces the position, really, doesn't it? To be honest,
we're kind of, as I say, we're kind of converging. I feel.
It is valuable to have voices of people who are, I guess, like you say, because they started in the more normal sphere. Their presence is, is more than just an anonymous presence, which is very helpful. I think, from our perspective, it will be more difficult to break into anything approaching the mainstream, given that we're coming from a position of anonymity.
Yeah.
Hence the need for a professional look.
Yes. That's true. Anyway, thank you, guests, and thank you, people in chat, and even a few panelists who dropped in to comment and such. And
I mean, I'm sure for the guys who were here, if they still are, I'm sure we're open to talking to you guys and working with you guys in the future if you're up for
it.
Definitely.
This is thank you for being good sports with this, and it was, as I said, it was a really good event, and definitely more in the future. And I guess that's it, really. And so thank you very much. Check out the link for the full video for the event to watch yourselves. And also, I'll also shill for the Wellington project. I'll put the link to the website, but also follow us on Twitter at Wellington Project. I think most of you probably follow us at this point, but if you need to, I'll put the link for Twitter as well in the description. Anything else you guys want to promote while we're here?
Well, I've been posting some history crap on the, insightful content on the Wellington Project Instagram.
Professional.
I can also see that John is still John D in the YouTube description for this stream.
I will change the name. Yes, I know I made a mistake. And Rob, anything you want to promote while you're here?
Oh, hang on. Getting some feedback there. Nothing at the moment. I'm sort of kind of. I want to wait till the kids are back at school. That way, I get my days back and I can actually edit stuff again. So, in about a week or two, I'll start producing more original content.
Oh, cool. So go subscribe to Rubber and the Pals in and Joz. Joz, your YouTube channel's so inactive, it's worse than mine, to be honest. Okay.
It was. I've got a back.
If we're shilling, it's pub quiz and politics this Friday at 9. I do need a fourth guest, so if anyone's listening and they would like to participate, just ping me on Twitter, or if you're in the inn, just message me there.
Oh, am I doing that?
Or leave a comment. Leave a comment below. Either way, you'll get to him. Anyway, thank you all for joining, and have a good night, and I'll see you all later.